For new mothers and all the amazing professionals who support them, there's this one question that just keeps coming up. When it comes to boosting milk supply, do those traditional herbal remedies actually work? Well, today we're going to cut through all the stories and anecdotes and really see what the science has to say.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The main question here seems simple, right? But the answer? Oh, it's pretty complex. Can something that literally grows out of the ground have a real, measurable effect on lactation? This is such a critical topic for parents, and it's definitely core knowledge for anyone studying to become a lactation consultant.
For centuries, I mean literally for generations, cultures all over the world have turned to plants like these. They're known as galactagogues. They've been passed down as the go-to remedies for low milk supply. But tradition is one thing, scientific proof, that's a whole other ballgame. So today, we are on the hunt for that proof. To really get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow a really clear path. We'll start with some context, then look at how researchers actually gather the evidence, and then, and this is the cool part, we'll learn how to read that evidence for ourselves, see what the data shows, and wrap up with the big takeaways. So let's start by setting the stage. Why is this question so incredibly important? Well, it's because this search for a natural boost to milk supply comes from a very, very real and often urgent need. And this quote, which comes directly from the study we're breaking down, it just gets right to the heart of it. When a mother thinks her milk supply is low, that's one of the top reasons she might stop breastfeeding before she planned to. So finding support that actually works, it's not just a nice to have, it's absolutely critical. So how in the world do we get a reliable answer? I mean, we can't just look at one or two studies and call it a day. We need to see the entire picture. And to do that, researchers use a really powerful tool to sift through all the science that's out there. They do something called a systematic review and a meta-analysis. Just think of it as a study of studies. It's this super rigorous method where they gather all the high-quality research on one topic and then statistically combine the data. What you get is a much, much stronger conclusion than any single study could ever give you. And check this out. This is the PRISMF flowchart from the paper, and it really shows you the massive scale of this whole process. Just look at that starting number. Researchers found over 12,000 potential studies. Then, through this incredibly strict filtering process, we're talking removing duplicates, screening titles, assessing quality, they whittled it all down to just 7. 7 high-quality trials for their final analysis. Now that is scientific rigor in action. Okay, now for a skill that is so valuable, especially for lactation professionals. We are going to learn how to read the main visual tool they use in a meta-analysis. It's called a forest plot. And here it is. I know, at first glance, it might look a little intense, but trust me, stick with me here. This one graph tells a super powerful, consolidated story about all the evidence on milk volume. We're going to break it down piece by piece. Let's look at the 4 key parts. First, see that vertical line right down the middle? That's our baseline. It's the line of no effect. If a result falls right on that line, it means the treatment didn't do a thing. Now, each of those little squares, that's a result from one of the individual studies. The horizontal lines coming out from the squares, that shows the margin of error. The wider the line, the less certain that result is. And finally, that diamond at the very bottom, that's the big one. That's the grand finale, the combined overall average of every study put together. The researchers also used one more cool tool called a funnel plot. Its main job is to check for something called publication bias. Basically, that's the risk that studies that find a negative result, that the herbs don't work, might not get published. This little plot helps make sure the results we're seeing aren't unfairly tilted towards only the positive studies. It's like a quality control check. Okay, we've learned how to read the map. Now it's time to see where it actually takes us. Let's dig into the key findings from this huge analysis. What did the data really show? And here it is. This is the headline number. The meta-analysis found that on average, the mothers taking the herbal supplements produced almost 159 milliliters more milk per day compared to the groups that didn't. Now you might be thinking, okay, 159 milliliters, is that a lot? Well, this slide puts it into perspective beautifully. That extra amount is about a 30 to 50% relative increase for moms in these studies. For a growing baby, that is a huge clinically meaningful improvement. That's a real difference. And the study didn't just stop at milk volume. It also looked at the hormones behind it. The analysis found a really significant increase in the hormone that makes milk, prolactin, by an average of over 23% in the groups taking the herbal supplements.
So, what about specific herbs? Well, fenugreek was the most commonly studied plant in all the trials. And when the researchers did a special analysis looking only at the fenugreek studies, the result was super clear. See that diamond? It's way over to the right of that no effect line. That signals a significant positive effect on milk volume. But hey, fenugreek wasn't the only herb that got some attention. The review also found really meaningful evidence for others. Shatavari, which is a big deal in Ayurvedic medicine, and ginger, famous for its anti-inflammatory powers, also showed really positive results for boosting milk production in the studies they looked at.
So the evidence is definitely looking promising, right? But like with all good science, we've got to understand the full picture, and that includes the limitations. What does all of this mean for us in the real world? You know, good research always acknowledges its own boundaries. The strengths here are obvious. This whole thing is based on the best kind of evidence, randomized controlled trials, and the results between them were pretty consistent. But the authors were also really honest about the limitations, like only looking at English language studies and the fact that the doses and how the herbs were prepared were different from trial to trial. So, what's the final verdict? Well, the combined evidence is pretty clear. Herbal galactagogues do show a significant positive effect on both milk volume and prolactin levels. There is real promise here. But to give them that final, definitive scientific seal of approval, the researchers say we still need more big trials with standardized doses and longer follow-up times. And that leads us to our final big question. We've gone from just tradition to having some real data. We see promise, but we also see a call for more research. So for all the professionals and parents listening, how does this level of evidence change the conversation? How do we take this promising but still kind of incomplete science and use it in our practice and in our choices? That's something to think about.